Good morning, this is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 27th. Well, this morning we're looking at the graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and we can see three systems out there. We have the remnants of Ida. Well, the system is still technically a tropical depression, but it's being sheared badly. We have an area of Invest 98L southwest of Bermuda. This system could develop a little bit, but it's going to run into a wall of wind shear. And then we have our system in the Gulf of Mexico, which I'm keeping a close eye on, Invest 99L over the Yucatan Peninsula. And if you notice on this image, there's a blob of convection just off the coast of the Carolinas, and that was an Invest, I believe it was Invest 97L, and that really never developed, but it is causing a powerful wind gradient in the Outer Banks. And here's a video from Bill Phillips yesterday. He was out there filming on the fishing pier in Virginia Beach. And you can see a lot of wind and wave action. There's been some abnormal high tides, but nothing major, but it's just an annoyance to people heading out to the beaches over the weekend. Be very careful out there. There's probably, really, it would be advisable for people not to swim in these types of conditions. But this wind gradient will continue for the mid-Atlantic, and then what's interesting is Invest 99L may actually impact the same area as it travels up the East Coast. So everybody needs to be aware of that situation. Let's take a look at our system Invest 99L rather. Here is the close-up floater loop from the National Weather Service of our Invest, and you can see over the Yucatan Peninsula it's a very disorganized, elongated area of low pressure. The hurricane hunters are supposed to be going out to check out this system this afternoon, but I don't really think they should bother with it. It's pretty much entangled with land at the moment. But this system is going to move generally north and head up towards the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. This is going to be mainly a rainmaker. I do not believe we're going to see much development with this system due to wind shear, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But here are all three of our systems on the Hurricane City map. You can see Ida out here. Now, normally a cone like that would be a scary thing for the United States, but not in this type of hurricane season where you have wind shear all over the Atlantic basin. I'm going to show you how much wind shear in a minute. And there's our other two Invest on the map. And again, the most important one at this point is 99L in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's go ahead and show you a water vapor loop real quickly here. And this system is, oops, wrong way. There we go. There's our water vapor image. And you can see here we have a lot of swirls out in the Atlantic basin. And there is wind shear all over the place. I like to consider it as called King Tut. It's a tropical upper tropospheric trough, and what it does is it causes areas of low pressure all along the Atlantic basin. This is common in a El Nino year where you have a lot of wind shear. The jet stream is from west to east, and it just blows the top off of all these thunderstorms, so it's just not going to allow these systems to get developed. But if you count how many areas of low pressure there are out here, it's really ridiculous. We've got 1, 2, 3, there's maybe one right there. We've got another area of low pressure right here, and then we have this one in the Gulf of Mexico. So nearly 6 areas of upper level lows causing wind shear in the basin, and that just causes westerly winds to slice through all these storms, not letting them develop, and it's just a very unfavorable pattern for development. And we've seen this all hurricane season long, basically wind shear everywhere. But it is, statistically speaking, we're a little bit ahead of 97, which was a more powerful El Nino than this year, slightly more powerful, and this season may catch up to 97 and may even beat it as far as the powerful El Nino. But let's go ahead and switch back to our images and talk about what's happening with our Invest and the rest of the basin out there. And here we have the relative vorticity of all the areas that are swirling out the basin, which I basically just showed you on the water vapor loop. But you notice down in the Yucatan, it's a very elongated area of low pressure. So this is going to be a very disorganized system as it heads north in the Gulf of Mexico. I think it's just going to be mainly a rainmaker. It could possibly become a named storm, but I'm not really thinking that's going to happen very much because of the wind shear and the being attached to an upper level low to its west. I just don't see much possibility for that. In fact, if you look at the wind shear analysis from the University of Wisconsin, you can see 40 to 50 knots of southwesterly shear out in front of this system. Now, if this system takes a more easterly path, say towards Tampa or the Big Bend, Florida area, it might have a little bit of a better chance to get its act together. But if it goes due north towards Louisiana or Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, it's really just going to get sheared to pieces. Not going to have much chance for development due to the wind shear here. And here is the wind shear, and again, you're talking 20 knots of shear all out in front of this system, so it's just not a very favorable environment at all. Now let's take a look at 1997 hurricane season. This was a very similar pattern to what we're dealing with this hurricane season. And you notice here, out here, we did have one major hurricane that year, and most of them all recurved out in the open Atlantic. And then we had one landfalling hurricane, and that was Danny, which dumped a tremendous amount of rain over the northern Gulf Coast. I don't expect that out of this system, but it will be a heavy rainmaker nevertheless. But I think most of the heavier rain is going to be over the Florida Peninsula and the Panhandle, if anything. But if you look at this season compared to where we stand right now, we've had more named storms. Actually, this hasn't been updated in a little while. There's not the last couple of storms are not on this map from the National Hurricane Center, but we are at 9 named storms, and they only ended up with, let me see, they ended up with 8 named storms back in 1997, and we're already at 9, so we're ahead of 1997, but all the systems this year have been trying to come west, but they've just had the tops sheared off of these storms due to the wind shear continuing from west to east across the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean. And it's just not allowing for these things to develop. But we've had no hurricanes make landfall this year. There was, again, in 1997, but not this year. You could argue the system out in the Fred out here in the East Atlantic that affected the not the Azores, the Cape Verde Islands out here, but this, for it to be technically a landfall, the eye has to make landfall, and the system kind of went between the islands out here as it traveled through. Even though they did maybe get some gust of hurricane force out there, it was not considered a hurricane landfall. So we're going so far this season without any hurricanes making landfall and very few tropical storms. Now, let's look at what's happened as far as landfalls. We've had Tropical Storm Ana affect the Carolinas, and we had Tropical Storm Bill affect the Texas coastline, hitting my number 5 area, which was Matagorda, Texas. And taking a look at my predictions, which I released before each hurricane season on May 15th, you can see my high-risk areas already. Matagorda's been knocked off the map, and if this system does develop, Panama City is right in the range of where the landfall projections are for this, and that is my number 3 pick, I believe, for this hurricane season. And over here, I also had a high risk for the west coast of Florida, so this is going to impact the west coast as well. So we'll see what happens with this. If it becomes a named storm, it will knock another one of my top 5 off the list of my years and years and years of doing this. 13 years, I believe, out of 15 or some such figure like that. It's been that where I've had at least 2 or more named storms affect 2 or more of my cities. So that we'll see if that happens. There's a long way to go this hurricane season. October is a very active month for the state of Florida. Let's take one final look at El Nino. Here's from the Climate Prediction Center the projections for El Nino going into the future here. And we can see it's going to peak around November, December, January, and then it's going to fade off as we go into next year. So next hurricane season, we would be in more of a neutral to La Nina type pattern, which would allow for more development in the Atlantic Basin. So we're going to see what happens as we head into next year. But this season could still end up peaking. El Nino could end up peaking towards the end of this hurricane season, which means the season could basically come to an abrupt halt around the middle of October if this continues to increase. We could the wind shear gets worse and worse. I just don't really see much development at the end of October, but we'll have to see what happens between now and then. But after that, it should be downhill, and then next hurricane season we'll have to be careful because things could be a little bit more favorable. All right, that's it for now. If this system does become a named storm, we will go ahead and do another update video on this, and the featured city at Hurricane City will be probably in the Florida Panhandle somewhere, but I haven't decided to do that yet because we don't know what kind of a system this is going to end up being. All right, that's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City, and spread the video around. Visit us on Twitter at Hurricane City. Thank you for watching.